Okay, welcome this morning, it's still morning, to this webinar. And in this webinar, we're going to be exploring our new funding call. So it's called From Standards to Impact, Embedding the Public Engagement and Data Research Initiative Good Practice Standards in Data for Research and Statistics. So the aim of the webinar today is to go through the requirements for the call. And if we could go to the next slide, please, Asma. So before we begin, I just wanted to encourage everybody to share your thoughts in the chat. Feel free as well to introduce yourself in the chat. It would be great to know who's here, and also for others perhaps to see if potentially there's other people you might want to collaborate with. So please do use the chat function to share who you are, what organization you're coming from as well. If you have a question for any of the speakers, then please use the Q&A function. So you can leave questions in the Q&A, and then we can address those questions at the end of the webinar. If there's any technical issues that you're facing, then also put that into the chat, and then our lovely Katie from the PEDRI team will be able to assist you with any issues. You can also enable captions. There should be a CC button at the bottom of the screen, and that will enable you to show captions. You can also disable that if it's on. And just to let everybody know that we're going to be recording this webinar so that others that haven't been able to attend today's webinar are able to benefit from that. Next slide, please. So for today's webinar, I will be providing this welcome, and then we are going to have Sumaira Khan, who's the operational lead at PEDRI, giving an overview of what PEDRI is. And then we're going to have Esther Belavia, who leads on our Good Practice Standards workstream, providing an overview of that workstream. And then I'm going to hand over to Asma Khan, who is leading on this funding call. And Asma is going to go through the nitty-gritty of what's involved within the funding. Then we're going to have about 30 minutes for the audience to ask questions and to clarify anything that hasn't been clear from this webinar. Next slide, please. So from this point on, I'll hand over to Sumaira Khan.
Thank you, Doreen. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Doreen mentioned, I'm Sumaira Khan. I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager and Operational Lead for PEDRI. So before we dive into the Good Practice Standards Funding Award, we wanted to just give you a bit of background to PEDRI. I know some of you may be new to PEDRI or only just starting to engage with our work. So we thought it'd be helpful just to set the scene a little bit, help you kind of understand who we are and what we're aiming to achieve, and also give you some useful context for the funding opportunity that we're launching and how it fits with the wider picture of strengthening public involvement and engagement in data research. Okay, so PEDRI was founded by 4 key organisations: Administrative Data Research UK, Health Data Research UK, the Office for National Statistics, and DARE UK. And these organisations came together to launch PEDRI to drive forward more meaningful public involvement and engagement in the use of data for research. So we are very much a sector-wide partnership, meaning that we work across the whole data-driven research ecosystem, so from academic institutions and public bodies to data custodians as well. And our focus is on data that has real impact on people's lives, and that includes health data, administrative data, like education or social care records, and also statistical data, which is collected through surveys and censuses as well. And we also work with collaborate with industry partners who are increasingly active in this space. So the idea is really to kind of ensure that wherever and however public data is being used for research, there's a high standard of trust, transparency, and public involvement guiding that work. So you can see here some of the logos of the organisations that we work with. So we started off with 4 since we've started, and we now have 18 organisations that are part of PEDRI. Next slide, please. So our strategy is built around 5 objectives, and I'm just going to very quickly kind of run you through our objectives. And these have been developed in collaboration with our partners. And each one kind of reflects a priority area where we see opportunities to work together to kind of strengthen public engagement and involvement across the data, research and statistics landscape. So the first one is collaboration and partnerships. So we believe that collaboration is key to amplifying public voices in data research. By working together across organizations and sectors, we increase the reach, diversity, and impact of public involvement and engagement. And our partnerships help us to avoid duplication, support knowledge sharing, and improve the quality and consistency of practice across the ecosystem. So through joint working groups, roundtables, and shared initiatives, we're trying to create spaces for honest dialogue and practical solutions as well. And this collaborative approach kind of helps make PIE more cost effective, but also sustainable in the longer term as well, which is always on our minds. The next one is around promoting good public involvement and engagement practices. So we're committed to embedding practical, meaningful approaches to public involvement and engagement that are specific to data research and statistics contexts. So our good practice standards are a strong foundation, and they clearly set out what good looks like. So we're trying to focus on how to apply these standards in real world settings, making public involvement less complex, more accessible and more impact. And Esther's going to be kind of talking a lot more about this, but our upcoming evaluation tools and case studies will also help kind of demonstrate what's working and why, and ensuring that PIE is not only done, but actually done really well. And it is an iterative process and it is a learning process, and we continue to learn. And the next one is around two-way engagement and communication. So effective public involvement and engagement starts with listening, right? So we want to be able to understand, we want to build stronger two-way communication channels that allows us to better understand public concerns, but also respond where we can and share how public voices are influencing decisions as well. So whether that's through inclusive campaigns, through with our partners, dialogues, events, what we're trying to do here is to build trust and confidence in how data is used. And we're particularly focused on kind of reaching underrepresented communities as well, because we know that, you know, data affects everyone and everyone should have a say. So this is crucial for us as well. And then learning and development. So we know that many researchers and practitioners want to do more, and we don't always have the tools or confidence to get started. So our resources working group and our resource hub, which is on our website, helps kind of identify and fill those gaps. So whether it's practical toolkits, peer learning, resources and guidance, we want to make it easy for people across the data research ecosystem to embed good public involvement and involvement across their work and at whatever stage they're at as well, which is really, really important. And then embedding a culture of public involvement and engagement is the final one. And what we're trying to do here is to really normalize involvement and engagement. And we aim to embed PIE into the culture of PEDRI, but also the wider ecosystem. So shaping projects, communications, and decision-making in ways that are genuinely inclusive and co-produced as well. And public involvement in data. Often it can be kind of a dark hole, and this is something that we don't want to encourage. We want to make it feel like, you know, that you're not digging into a dark hole and it's not a complex space, but instead we want to bring clarity and light by promoting good public involvement and engagement and transparency, shared learning, and also fairness as well. So we want to create spaces for people to get involved. And then the final thing at the bottom here, you can see equity, diversity, and inclusion. So this is something that we aim to weave throughout all our objectives. And at PEDRI, we don't see this as a kind of standalone priority. It's embedded across all our objectives and projects. And we recognise that public involvement and engagement in data research, to be truly meaningful, it should reflect a broad range of experiences, backgrounds, and voices, especially those that are historically underrepresented. So what we're trying to do is kind of work with partners to remove barriers to participation, reach beyond the kind of usual voices, and also ensure everyone has a fair opportunity to shape how data is used. So that's a very quick kind of overview of our objectives, just to give you some context around PEDRI and what we're all about. I'll now hand over to Esther, who will delve into the standards a little bit more.
Thank you, Samira, and hello everyone. I'm Esther. I'm the PEDRI Good Practice Standards Lead, and I've been since September 2023, and I've been working with a bunch of colleagues from the data ecosystem that is called the Good Practice Standards Working Group. Next slide, please. The working group, as is today, is approximately 10 people. We are all different in terms of experience, the handling of data. We do have a member of the public as well that is not affiliated with any specific organization and interested in shaping this work and has been since the very inception of the PEDRI Good Practice Standards Working Group. We do work across the field from the data infrastructure to actually conduct planning, design, and evaluation of involvement and engagement activities for different organizations. The working group has been changing over time, which has also guaranteed that there will constantly be fresh eyes looking at the work ongoing and wider contribution as well. Next slide. This is a little bit of a review of our journey since the very first draft that was created of the standards, which at the time was called Best Practice Standards for Public Involvement and Engagement in Data Research and Statistics. It all started very early with a review of approximately 29 guidance standards already in the data field and shared by different organizations or available beyond the great literature, also in academic literature. And this work was carried out by the working group that narrowed down specific themes that were then discussed during the course of a couple of workshops, hybrid workshop, that led with 62 participants, that led to the very first draft. At that time, the first draft was then prepared for a wider consultation, which was conducted through a public survey. They received a total of 139 responses, after which we did publish a report summarizing the feedback received from different colleagues within the data research statistics field, as well as members of the public and organization representing the public and patients' voice in the case of the L data space in particular. After integrating this feedback, we did create an updated version that is the live version that has now been published and has been there in our website since early 2025, and is the one of reference for this specific funding call. What we see happening in the next few stages, as mentioned by Samara, there will be the development of an evaluation tool, which is already undergoing, and the working group has been working on creating a blueprint for consultation, which Asma is at the moment leading. So more to come after summer onto it. Next slide, please. This is an overview of our standards, and there is a QR code there to have easy access to the document that is also available on our standard tab within the PEDRI website. We do touch on equity, diversity and inclusion, data literacy and training, two-way communication, transparency, mutual benefit, effective involvement and engagement, and creating a culture of involvement and engagement. Within the documentation available online, as well as the description that is available on the webpage, you will find a definition for each one of the standards, as well as some examples that might give an idea on what good public involvement engagement might look like within the specific context of the standards. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of an overview of what you can find online about the standards if you want to learn more about it, as well as collect information for filling in your application. The first document on the left is the downloadable version of the Good Practice Standards available online. And next to it, there is the report that we published with the overall feedback that we received on a previous version that could give you an idea of what were the expectations on each of the themes that inform the 7 standards from different colleagues in the field, as well as mentioned, members of the public and different organizations, representatives of the public and patient voice. There are also a couple of blogs, in particular the one that launched the final version, which was published on our website, and you can find it on the news and events section, and is about introducing the PEDRI practice standards that tells a little bit more details about the story of the standards and their development. But there is also a blog written by a couple of colleagues involved in the PEDRI initiatives, Amy and Anna, that commented on the presentation of the standards during the very first PEDRI webinar at the beginning of this year. And finally, just to make sure that you had a look at the funding call webpage, where you can find also some reference based on some resources that you can access through Resources Hub, and link to specific standards should you need it for reference, or even just to have a look and get an idea. And I will pass it on to Asma. Thank you.
Okay, so just before passing on to Asma, I just wanted to let everybody know about why we've decided to run this call. So the theme of the call is from standards to practice. So as Samira and Esther has highlighted, we've been through a very enriching and long process of developing these standards. But we recognize that with most standards, they're developed, and then it's actually quite a challenge for people to take these standards and actually make them active and embrace them within the work that they're doing. So that's why we've gone for from standards to practice, because we would like to assist people with embedding them in different ways. So the aim of the funding call, the first is to support data research organizations and infrastructure programs. So long-running research programs to embed the good practice standards in the public involvement and engagement activities. And through the funding call, we would like to explore the practical challenges of delivering effective public involvement and engagement in the context of data and statistics, and also to then evaluate this application and impact of embedding the good practice standards across different data sectors and different research environments. And through this call, we would like to also create a community of practice of public involvement and engagement practitioners using the PEDRI Good Practice Standards to really embed growth and connections and collaborations within the sector around the Good Practice Funding Call. So to go through the nitty-gritty aspects of the call, I'll now pass on to Asma Khan.
Thank you, Doreen, Samira and Esther for the overview of PEDRI and the Good Practice Standards. Welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Asma Khan. I'm Impact and Evaluation Officer at PEDRI, and I've been working with the whole of the PEDRI team to develop this funding call along with some of our stakeholders as well. So I wanted to actually begin by sorry, just switching between screens here, by highlighting the involvement of public members in the development of this funding call. The PEDRI Public Advisory Group, affectionately known as the PEDRI PAG, reviewed and made recommendations around the call eligibility criteria and specifications. And 3 members of the PAG, who are Jan Speechley, Hina, and 1 member who wants to remain anonymous, reviewed the full call document and gave their feedback, some of which was incorporated into the final version of the funding call. We will then invite 2 members of the PAG to join the review panel for the call. So they will assess applications and join the review panel as equal members, deciding on which projects will be funded. We also received very helpful feedback from the PEDRI Steering Group and the Good Practice Standards Working Group in the development of the call. So I'm going to go on to present an overview of the call. I'd like you to note, though, that the full details are available on the detailed call document on the call webpage on the PEDRI website. So just to share the eligibility criteria, and to be very clear, only applications that meet these criteria will be assessed by the review panel. So projects must include the following information in their applications. The projects must commence on the 1st of November of 2025 or as close to this date as possible. All projects must be completed within 12 months. Please note that there isn't a minimum duration, so it can be for any time period within that 12 months. Projects must not exceed £15,000. This is the maximum amount that will be attributed to each project. And on the call document, we have included some examples of eligible costs, but these aren't this isn't an exhaustive list. So if you do have costs that you think would be justified to improve PIE practice within your organisation, within your project, then please get in touch to check this with us. And all projects must address a minimum of 3 standards in depth. One of these must be standard 1, equality, diversity and inclusion. And we expect that applicants identify any risks to successful project completion and propose appropriate mitigations within their applications. So once you have understood the, so once you've understood the eligibility and specification criteria and have an idea about how to improve PIE practice in your organisations, please complete the application form, which can be found on the core web page on the PEDRI website. Please include these documents with your completed application form. This is a project timeline, which you might include as a Gantt chart or something similar, a statement of support from your organisation. This might be your head of department or service, and the CV of the applicant and any co-applicants. And you can ask any questions about your application by the 1st of August by emailing us at the email address on the slide. So I want to go into a little bit more detail now about the project specifications. Again, this is an overview and the details are available on the full call document. You will need to keep all of the elements that I'm going to mention in mind and as you write your application, because we will use these to assess your proposed project. All of these criteria are equally weighted, so your application should be balanced with this in mind. So this is what we expect to see within your proposed projects. First of all, a project plan that demonstrates an awareness of your organisation's needs in relation to public involvement and engagement, and the plan should identify how these needs will be met. Applicants must demonstrate that the project can feasibly be completed within 12 months and identify any potential risks to successful project completion and suggest appropriate mitigation strategies. The second criteria is that applicants should demonstrate a good awareness of the PEDRI good practice standards and focus your application on a minimum of 3 standards in your project plan, one of which again must be standard 1, equity, diversity and inclusion. We would also need to see evidence of involvement of public members in the development of your application and plans for their ongoing involvement in the project, so in its delivery and evaluation. We'll also be looking closely at the applicant's expertise and their track record or potential to successfully deliver the project that you propose in your application. And we'd like to see evidence of involvement, evidence of some consideration of the longer term sustainability of your proposed PIE activities and evidence of organisational support for this. The questions on the application form have been designed for you to demonstrate how you'll meet these criteria in your project. All the questions do have maximum word limits, but you don't need to reach this limit to justify your project. For example, if you're proposing a smaller scale activity that can be delivered in 2 months, you might find that you don't need as many words to justify and explain your proposed project. And we'll use all the documents that you submit to assess your application. So for example, your experience of or potential to deliver a PIE project will be demonstrated through your response to that question on the application form, your CV, and the statement of support from your head of department. Similarly, your project plan will be assessed through your response to that question on the application form, your project plan, the timeline, and the statement of support. So I'm going to finish now with some key dates before we open up to Q&A. Please do submit your questions to the Q&A function if you haven't already, and upvote any questions that you would like to hear the answer to that somebody has already put in the Q&A. So the call is currently open with all the documents you need to submit your application on the funding call webpage on the PEDRI website. And you can contact the PEDRI team by email to ask for clarification on the funding call document. Our email address is included on the following slide as well. The call will close at midnight on the 1st of September, and the review panel will assess applications in September and share outcomes on the 1st of October. We expect projects to commence on the 1st of November and to end by October the 31st in 2026. So that concludes my overview of some of the details around the funding call. And now it's over to you. Please ask any questions about making an application to the funding call. Take a look at the questions that have already been asked and upvote any that you'd like to hear the answer to. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can today, and create a list of frequently asked questions to add to the website next month. If you have any questions after the webinar and while you're completing your application, please do get in touch. So we're going to go over now to the Q&A. And invite the rest of the PEDRI team to perhaps switch their cameras on to sharing, responding to the questions. So taking a look at the open questions, Adam has asked, can the proposal be PPIE activities that are the foundation of future work or applications? What exactly has to be completed in 12 months? So my suggestion, Doreen, go ahead.
I think it would be useful to understand a bit more about that particular question. Sorry, it's been displaced by another question. Oh yeah, so that was about the future work applications. I think it would depend on how much that future work or applications are then going to embed public involvement within the overall organization or the work program. So I think that would probably merit some discussion with the team to see if it would be within remit. But the part of the work that is funded by the call would have to be completed within the 12 months. So for example, if that application was then going to be going into a bigger bid that provided funding for the organization to do something quite substantial, we would need the outputs or the impact from what we have funded to be completed within those 12 months. But I definitely would encourage Adam to get in touch with the team so that we can find out a little more about what would be proposed within that future work or applications. Because what we would like to see as well, going back to the slide that was going through what the aims of this funding call is for, is try to assess the impact of actually embedding those standards within the organization or the research program. So I think the slight risk with that approach, Adam, is if the application isn't successful, then it would be how you would demonstrate that by carrying out the activity that embedded the standards within your program or in your organization. So I think the bottom line for me is let's have a discussion around that so that we can understand what you're proposing a bit more.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Adam, and thank you for the response, Doreen. Someone has anonymously submitted a question that is, can the funding be used for part funding a PIE project? And I think, Doreen, your response to the previous question partially answers that one, in that we're looking for a discrete and distinct project that will be completed within the 12 months and within the funded amount of £15,000 per project. So there may be ways in which you have a wider project but can create a smaller distinct project within it that can be funded through the funding call. Would you like to add anything to that, Doreen?
Yeah, so I totally, I think you've answered that question, Asma. I think it would also depend on the nature of the part funding. So for example, if your organization, say, wanted to match fund that or create a larger project, then I think that that is quite, as Asma has said, something distinct. And if our pot is added to something else and you're providing something distinct, as Asma has said, then that would probably count. But again, I think we would need a discussion with the central team. But it's whether that larger project can then deliver in the 12 months. So I think that would also probably merit some discussion with the team.
Thank you for the question and your support with answering it, Doreen. Um, a second question. I'm just going to have to look see if anything's been upvoted. Okay. So another anonymous question is, are you looking for proposals for embedding the GPS in a single research project program, or are you more interested in proposals using the funding to help embed the GPS at an organizational, cultural level, for example, governance or training? Doreen.
So both, I would say. The single research program, if that research program has potential to impact the wider organization, then by all means, we would consider that research program. But the funding is not going to be going to kind of research programs that are of a short duration. The criteria is more around infrastructure programs, so large research programs that have a potential to have a marked impact on the infrastructure program, or in the case of organizations. It could be that there is a program within an infrastructure program that can then focus on PPIE. So I think you will notice from our responses that we don't want to make this very closed. We're quite open to having discussions with applicants about what might work. So, definitely get in touch with the team. But yes, it can support training. It can focus on information governance within an organization, or it could actually be working within a setting of a distinct, as Asma was saying, a distinct piece of work or research program within that wider organization or a bigger infrastructure program. I think what we're unlikely to fund is a research program in and of itself that then doesn't have impact within a wider program of work or an organization.
Thank you, Doreen. And I'd also remind people to keep an eye on the specification criteria that we will use to assess your applications, which are all equally weighted. So there's equal weight given to the project plan and its justification, so the activities that you want to undertake within the funded period. But there's equal weight given then to consideration of sustainability of your PIE activities within your organization. So to keep an eye on both aspects, both on what you're going to achieve within the project, but also how that activity might be sustained in the longer term as well is they're both equal considerations in terms of the assessment criteria for the funding call. And we'll move on to another anonymous question. How can people get in touch with us so we can help as a potential PPIE member? How can people get in touch with us so we can help support projects? So I wonder whether Samira might be able to suggest ways in which people can offer to help and become public members for people submitting for organisations submitting applications.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people that are looking for new members to join their organisations. And I think PEDRI can work as a conduit there. So certainly get in touch with us if you'd like to be involved in specific projects. And then when there are projects that are, or organisations that are looking for people, we can definitely help make that link as well. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with us and share your details. And then as funded applications that come through, or anybody else that's looking for public members to be more involved, we can work as a conduit.
Thank you. Thank you, Samira. All applications. Okay, so I think there's another question from Thomas, which is, will applications for funding as part of a wider system project be considered? For example, NHS app public engagement in London, 15K could be used for a smaller project within the wider system work. I can guess the answer to this one, but I'm just going to go to Doreen to confirm.
Yes, I think it's a similar answer to the previous question, which is if you can demonstrate how that smaller project would impact the larger project, and if that's at organizational level or if this is an infrastructure type grant or project, then yes, I think, do get in touch with us and we can explore if this would be within remit.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. Esther, I think you have something to contribute to that answer as well.
Oh no, I think I clicked it by accident.
Okay. Oh, this is a challenging question, but it has been upvoted. So my system of going for upvoted questions first means that I have to put it to us to the PEDRI team. So what is an example of an ideal project for this funding call?
I think the answer to that is quite simple. There is no ideal. There are some great examples out there of public engagement done really well for projects and organizations that do public engagement and involvement well within the data space. So I think that if you're looking for exemplars, then those might be ones that you might want to look to in terms of what things could look like. But I think we can't emphasize enough the importance of context. Are you in a infrastructure program? Are you more within that research environment? Are you looking to change culture, as one of the questions asked, across the whole organization? And the project will be different depending on that. It'll also be different depending on what kind of data the organization or the infrastructure program is looking at. So somebody looking at financial data will probably have different challenges in terms of engagement and involvement compared to somebody perhaps working within health that has quite a lot of guidance that comes from different organizations such as NIHR. So we're being really intentionally not prescriptive in terms of how we would like people to embed them. I think we're very excited to, look at innovative ways that people might want to embed the good practice standards within their organizations. So I would say, we would love to see different things. So there is no ideal, but there are good practices. We have our good practices. You might have some as well that are more specific to your sector. I would say look to that and maybe explore what's been done within your field or what you can borrow from other fields that can actually add to your sector, field, and setting as well.
Thank you, Doreen, and thank you for the challenging but really it's interesting and important question. And because I'm a bit nitpicky when it comes to kind of detail and following guidelines, and I will say that broadly speaking, an ideal project will be that one which meets all of the eligibility criteria and takes a balanced approach to meeting all of the specification criteria as well. So the criteria that we will use to assess your application. And an important part of the application and the first question, which is about your planning your proposed project, which has the greatest number of maximum words that you can use as well, is to justify the need for your project. So an ideal project would identify a need within their organization, and then consider how feasibly, but also creatively and innovatively, you might address that need through the project that you propose. So whilst we won't dictate how you go about doing that, it is up to applicants to kind of demonstrate that they're meeting an identified need, and that they can propose an effective solution to meet that need, and a project that can feasibly be completed within the 12 months and within the £15,000 limits and parameters of the funding call. I hope that helps with as part of the response, and in addition to what Doreen outlined as well. So just taking a look at the questions again. I can't see. Oh, okay. So this is a challenging one, and we're happy to answer those questions as well. And we have an anonymous question that has actually been upvoted that asks. It's a month and a half before the deadline. Is it too late to begin an application now from scratch? I am going to open it out to the rest of the team, but I'm happy to respond to that as well. I think that indicates that I should respond to that. I guess, is it too late? It depends on your commitments and obligations between now and the application deadline. But we would also expect that the people who apply for the funding will already have a sense of the PIE needs in their organisation, and perhaps some idea of how they might be resolved, and that the funding call can act as an impetus for applicants to put their ideas down on paper, continue perhaps conversations that have already been begun within their organisations about what the needs are around PIE in their organisations. We're hoping that there is enough time. We are here to provide support as well for you to make the application. And the application form itself isn't too onerous. There are 5 questions that are required that quite directly address each of the specifications. So the application we have tried to make the application process as straightforward and as helpful to you as possible. So the questions are framed very directly to support you to frame your application in a very clear way. And alongside the 5 application questions, we'll ask for a breakdown of costs. And given that it's £15,000 of funding to be used within the period of a year, we would expect that the projects might be quite contained, and therefore it's feasible for you to. We would hope that it'd be feasible for you to be able to complete an application by the deadline. I'm just going to take a look over at the team and see if anybody else would like to add to that response. No, okay. So. And refresh. I'm just looking for the voted questions. Okay, so we have a question from Rebecca, who asks whether PhD students can apply for this call. And I guess, Doreen, you have your hand up.
Feel free to go ahead, Asma. I can come in if necessary at the end.
Okay. Thank you, Doreen. I probably need confirmation from you on this one anyway, but I would suggest that PhD students would be able to make an application for the call if the project was going to impact more widely than their PhD research project. So if it was going to improve PIE practices and embed the good practice standards, at a departmental or organizational level within their research institution or organization. Doreen, would you have anything to add to that? Okay, thank you. Andy has asked, I know you are doing work on using the good practice standards as a potential evaluation tool. Could this funding be used to evaluate existing PPIE work against the GPS?
Would you like me to come in as well?
If you would, Esther.
I can respond on the evaluation bit just to clarify. We are developing, it's ongoing, a draft has been developed, but we are in the midst of consultation at the moment. So an evaluation tool has been created to document the progress of the implementation of the good practice standards, as well as the successful implementation and any learnings that come with it. So it is something that comes alongside the good practice standards, but the standards are not used as evaluation tool themselves. With respect to the fact whether the funding, so a funding application might come in to evaluate the standards using existing example, I guess I'll pass you on this answer to Asma and Doreen that have been leading on the funding call, and they might clarify if they see this as a potential for the project to be funded.
Thank you, Esther. We do, Doreen. Okay, so we would like to bring the work around the evaluation tool into conversation with the funding call, and perhaps use the evaluation tool as the mechanism by which we ask funded projects to report on the progress and the impact of the PIE work that they undertake within their projects. So in that way, the two streams of work, PEDRI work in terms of the evaluation tool and the funding call are likely to come together. Doreen, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, Andy, that just to add on to what Esther and Asma have answered already, I think it also depends on what the end goal of that evaluation would be. So if the project is actually to evaluate how well the organization is doing, to come up, say, with an action plan for the organization to then work towards, meeting those standards, and that potentially could be a standalone project that you're doing within your organization to actually improve PIE practice. But I think going back to Asma's point around justification and perhaps demonstrating why this particular project would be needed within your organization, and then what the sustainability and kind of impact would be for your organization would be quite key in such an activity.
Okay, thank you for the question and for the response, Doreen and Esther. So this question has a couple of upvotes, so it's an important one to ask. How many applications will be granted? We do have a limited funding pot, and we are offering up to £15,000 per project, and projects can request for less than £15,000 for the activities that they're proposing as well. So there isn't a definitive answer to that yet, because we will have to see how many applications we get and how much funds each applicant is asking for. But I think we will be funding anywhere between 10 and 20 projects in this round of the funding call. Does that sound about right, Doreen? Okay, thank you. And there is a question here from an anonymous attendee. Can we make an application for a CIO, which I'm hoping that somebody else on the team will know what it is?
It's a community interest organization.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
It would be good to have clarification.
Yes. Can we make an application for a CIO which is currently under application from the Charity Commission? Should have a result by 1st September, but want to get application in before then. In answer to that, I would say that a key part of the eligibility criteria and the criteria for assessment of applications are is project feasibility of completion within 12 months. So where there is uncertainty around the establishment of an organization in time for the project funding to begin, I think my guess would be that that would affect the feasibility of the project being completed, would affect scoring against the eligibility of criteria and the assessment criteria of whether that project can feasibly be completed within 12 months. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that, Doreen?
Yes, I think, as you highlighted, Asma, there will be a risk and mitigation section to this application. So for me, that would fall under the risks. But Asma is right that if the risks are not mitigated adequately, then that might affect the scoring of the application. So I think you've kind of answered that one. I wouldn't discourage the applicant depending on what the CIO is, and I think we've had a definition as well come in the answers. So, and it's disappeared. Okay. Oh, it's gone into the chat. So that's there's charitable incorporated organization. That is. So yes, I think as long as there is enough mitigations around that, and that assures the funding board, then that might potentially go through. It would be very interesting to see what that is about, as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the question. And I'm just going to take a quick time check. We've got 8 minutes left, and I hope that we might be able to go through the remaining 3 questions in that time. If successful, would there be a requirement for successful applicants to collaborate in defining how you go from standards to impact? Assuming that as the principles are standards, how will the methodology for assessing and operationalizing be standardized from what applicants do? Thank you for the question. It's a really interesting one. I'll have a go with answering the first part of it to begin with. So would there be a requirement for successful applicants to collaborate in defining how you go from standards to impact? I think there certainly will be opportunities for successful applicants to consider collaboratively how to define the shift from standards to impact. Some of that will be individual to the applicants and to the organizations that they're working in, but it might be possible to identify common themes across the different projects that we fund. And an important part of where those kind of conversations will take place is an expectation and an invitation to all funded project applicants to join a community of practice. And this will be a relatively low intensive kind of in terms of labor commitment to join an online meeting once a month to share experiences and knowledge and skills that are gained throughout the completion of the projects. So and the PEDRI team will be part of that community of practice too. So we will hear from you about your experiences, and I'm certain that they will feed into the different strands of work going on around the good practice standards. And the second part of your question is, assuming that as the principles are standards, how will the methodology for assessing, operationalizing be standardized from what applicants do? I have a part of a response to this, but I'm just going to take a look over at the team to see if anybody else would like to contribute a response to that. Doreen?
It might be useful to get Esther's input into this particular question, but from my perspective, just going back to the discussion, I think, Asma, that we had with Andy's question around the evaluation. There is an evaluation framework being developed, and I think, as Asma mentioned, we are going to embed this in the reporting. So the reporting guidelines will be standardized across the project in that way, and that will enable us to get some form of standardization and reporting and impact across the different projects. But I'm keen to get Esther's input as well into that.
Yeah, it is along those lines. And in the funding call webpage, there is explicitly documented that there will be 3 in particular self-assessments that will be very much directed towards that that way, trying to explore not just whether the evaluation tool is fit for purpose, as well as what is going on in terms of the progress of the project with respect to the standards. Sorry to come in a little bit late. I was following up on Andy's message, and Doreen, I saw your reply with that specific context. And I just wanted to add to Andy, it would be good to also clarify whether this would be an assessment of existing project that happened within a specific context. So they are all related, and then you want to build, a specific plan. And again, as mentioned by Doreen, that need to be clarified in terms of impact as well as the need for it. In your previous question, I thought you referred to a review of the literature out there, so beyond your organization. And Doreen had also responded to that. I just wanted to follow up on it.
Thank you, Esther and Doreen. And part of the evaluation and assessment of the funding call and the projects within it, an important part of it will be recognizing the nuance and difference and the challenges, but even the undesirability of standardizing every aspect of PIE practice because of the very human and differentiated nature of human experiences that we know come along with PIE. So some of it may not need to be standardized in that way, and we will recognize and record those kind of observations and experiences as well. So on to the final question, I think, which will bring us to time as well, is please could you provide direct contacts for the PEDRI team members for support with applications? And I am going to suggest, and Doreen may correct me, but I think it will be best to use the general PEDRI contact email, only because that will give all of the team access to the questions that are arising and all of us opportunities to answer your questions and discuss them as needed as well. And I think the best way for you to put your questions is through the contact at PEDRI email address. Just looking to the team to make sure that I've got that right. Yes. Okay. So that will mean that your questions will be given the attention by the right people at the right time. I hope that's reassuring for you. And we have 2 minutes left and one question that I think we might be able to squeeze in. So as the final question for the webinar, thinking of evaluating the PPIE that has been developed and implemented in the Southwest SDE, we say it's good as the PPI leads, but we are biased and we don't know what we don't know. So it's not quite a question, but it's more of a comment or an observation. And we'd be delighted and very interested in seeing an application around this particular project, Andy. Yes, recognizing our biases and acknowledging that we don't know what we don't know is always part of the kind of problems and issues that we come up with. But we're hoping that the projects will help to clarify some of that uncertainty for all of us, and give us the opportunity to learn as a community of practice and from the experiences of all the funded projects. And with that, I think we have addressed all of the questions. And it's nice to be able to finish on time. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us at the webinar. I hope we have raised your interest and motivation to submit an application to the funding call. And we very much look forward to seeing the applications come in. Please do get in touch with us by email if you do have any questions. We are here to support you in completing your application, but also discussing your ideas around potential projects too. So I'm just going to take a look over at the team and ask if anyone wants to say a final goodbye and thank you. We all good?
And good luck. Yeah, we
And good
look
luck.
forward to see
Indeed.
applications.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we look forward to receiving your applications by the 1st of September. I thank you very much for joining us, and this brings the webinar to the close.